Okay, so today we sit down with a financial advisor to discuss money, okay? What it looks like to invest in property from a financial perspective with the amount of money going in, the amount of deposits that you're going to need, and all the little details that you may not be thinking about. Now, the good thing about this financial advisor, and the reason why I wanted to bring this gentleman to you is because he has the experience. He's not just a financial advisor who advises about investing in property, but he actually does it himself and has years of experience. So who not better to learn from than someone who's got a bit of experience and knows how to get you the best deals, the best financial deals when it comes to lending. So check out this interview and I know you're gonna love it, but there's only one thing. The microphone didn't really work too well. My microphone didn't really work too well. I did check the microphone, but for some reason, I don't know what happened. So when I replayed it at the end, you couldn't believe I literally fell off my chair because you can't even hear me. You can hear him, but you can't hear me. But he gives so much good information. First of all, I didn't want to ask him to sit and do a whole another hour interview again. And second of all, I just felt like, you know what, you guys can just about make out what I'm saying. So make it out, watch it, and absolutely take down all the nuggets that he gives because there's some good quality content in there. Watch it to the end. If you like the video, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in another video. Welcome, Kadir, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. It's something new for me. It's not something I've done before, so a bit nervous, but let's see.
Yeah, this is so informal. I mean, these guys are absolutely fine.
Okay.
You know, you're based in the UK, sort of predominantly all your investments would be in the UK. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, you know, how you got started, how you got to where you are today?
Right, so I'm now 52 years of age. I sort of got into property first time when I purchased my first house, all the way back in 1991. That was actually enforced by my father. I had saved up, I had a job living at home, no outgoings. So I managed to save up and I thought I'm gonna buy, I always wanted a BMW. And my dad said, no, if you live under my roof, you're gonna get a house for us. I was, why do I need a house for? So bought a house and rented it out for about 6-7 years. And that was my journey onto the property. And then I sold that. Didn't make any money because we went through sort of stagnation in property market just after, because as you know, there was a big collapse in 1989. So I bought it just after the collapse, luckily. But there was a bit of stagnation in the property market. So I sold it without much of a profit, but it didn't really cost me anything because it was tenanted all that time. So then I bought another property and I made about 3 years later, I sold it. I made about 50,000 profit on it. So with that money, plus I had more savings, I said to my dad, you know, we need to look at something. So to my surprise, sort of a month or so later, my dad said, well, I bought a pub. I said, what, a pub? What are we going to do with a pub? He said, oh, it's got planning for an HMO. I goes, what's an HMO? And he said to me, I don't know. You go and find out. And that was my sort of initiation into HMO investing. So I went to the local authority, asked, said, oh, HMO stands for House of Multiple Occupation. So they explained, I didn't even know what it was. So now in Wickham, where the Wickham District Council offices are, the opposite side, nearly the other side of the road, is the local university. So with my paperwork, I went to the uni, I said, I bought this building. It's got planning for 18-bedroom HMO. Here's a blank sheet of paper. Tell me what you want in it, and I will do it to your specification. And they were delighted because they said it's the first time somebody had come to them before doing the work. So that worked really well for me because I then worked with the uni, and then we converted it. And finally, we got a contract with them under a scheme they used to call a head tenancy scheme. So where the university used to charge you 6%, but they used to put a student in charge because it was 18 people living there. So you can imagine, first years, they're out of their homes, you know, they want to have a party, they want to have a good time. So I didn't really want to be dealing with, you know, 15, 16 students on a Friday night who had few too many. So that worked well because it was the university's responsibility. They used to charge me 6% for it. And it worked fantastically for 15 years. So in that time, I had, if you imagine the old, because the actual pub was on the old A40 from London to Oxford. So the pub also had in the back sort of another area for the horse and the cart, because if there was a night time, they had to stay. So they had the space for the horse and the cart. So I had that building that was fairly derelict. So I got planning to convert that to 7-bedroom HMO. So then I demolished that and I built a 7-bedroom HMO into that. In the meantime, I'd then gone into financial services. So I think in 2003, one of my friends said, oh, he was my actually financial advisor, because I used to work for a French company as a UK sales manager. So, and we were selling catering equipment to sort of fine dining restaurants, Marco Pierre White, Gordon Ramsay, these were our clients. So he turned up and he was selling me an ISA. So because I always did an ISA every year. And he said, look, you'd be good at this job yourself. And he sort of sold me the whole thing, like, oh, you'll be put up in a hotel, they'll train you up, become a financial advisor, da, 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 da. But what he didn't tell me was that was a 6 months intensive training. And if you don't pass at the end of it, get the license, you're out of a job. After about 2 months, I hated it. But it was just this feeling inside me that if I leave now, I just feel like I walked away, I feel like a failure. So my intention was that I'll get the certificates and I'll leave. I won't do anything in this industry. So once then Co-op Bank gave me an area, which was out of 3,000 advisors, 2,600 in the country. Oh, so the only way was up for it.
And then started, of course, you did.
Yeah. So I then started financial services. So took my area to top 30 in the country. And then got headhunted by an IFA practice very nice guy called Peter Fulcher. And I worked with him for about 2 years. Then I thought, why am I sharing half my commission with somebody else? So then I set up on my own back in 2007. But I then diversified, because when I was an IFA, I used to advise on pensions, investments, mortgages, everything. And really, you can't be a master of all trades. So I just then, and because I was already in property as well with my HMO, I then just concentrated doing mortgages. And then obviously, and one of the things was, having done the HMO, like, you should never do like I did it, i.e. no, knowledge of the industry whatsoever. It was completely the opposite way of what you should do. I think nowadays people have a lot more access. You got YouTube channels, you got Clubhouse, you have Facebook. There is so many avenues people have today to learn about a certain strategy before they can actually jump in. Whereas in my case, I was thrown at the deep end. I didn't even know what an HMO was at the time. But luckily that property did have planning. So, and we had the funds to do the conversion. So it also taught me some very, very important lessons as well. And one of the things it did for me was that I helped so many people get onto the HMO ladder. So I'll give you an example. One of my clients came to see me, an elderly gentleman from India, and he was working as a baggage handler. And he said, oh, I've sold my house. I need you to get me a mortgage. But obviously his income wasn't enough. So I had to add his daughter. But he then forgotten his postcode. So I just Googled his postcode and looked at his property, and it was an end terrace. So I goes, why are you selling this? This property has huge opportunity to add, a double-story extension, turn it into an HMO. I'll get you finance to do that. And then you can buy. He said, what's an HMO? So, and then I got him onto a property ladder like that. Today, that guy owns 14 HMOs, and he started from there. So he gave up his job within 2 years. So I was able to add value to my clients as well. So, helping so many people getting onto the property ladder. So, and that's what.
Sorry to interrupt you. So is HMO a route that you have decided to predominantly focus on during your property career yourself?
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't. I was thrown into it. There was no, I mean, like I said to you, I didn't even know where HMOs were. But it was just because I did that, and I sort of learned ABC literally by hand, because went to the local authority. Luckily, also had the planning already. But the other thing was such a large building as well, 18 bedroom. Normally you have a 3, 4, or 5 bedroom HMO. So mine was 18 bedroom. But the good thing was that, at that time, I think it was giving me 50 odd £1,000 a year income. So, and then it gave me an idea. Then I built the second building, I think some 5 years later, for 7 bedrooms. And that added more to my income. I was getting nearly 90,000 a year income just from my rental. So that really helped me to sort of, also, I always had this back of my mind, if something went wrong with my job, I always had a backup. And you know, what happened was, as you will know, with the credit crunch in 2007, 2008, you know, my sort of income went from 6 figures on the mortgage side down to about 30K. So, but my rental income was still there. You know, my HMO. But I mean, one thing I did make a mistake was that from after the credit crunch, it took me, I think, another 5 years before I started investing again. It really sort of scared me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my
mortgage rates went up considerably during that time, didn't they? And I guess
yeah,
the cost of your mortgage then would go up accordingly, and your profits just almost knocked out the window.
Yeah, actually, mine was the other way around, because I had a tracker mortgage, and as you know, they kept reducing the base rate. So my income, my cost, my mortgage went down from 3,500 a month on the HMO to 1,500. So it was the opposite. But what I did was I actually kept my payments at 3,500 to make sure that I pay off my capital a lot quicker. But with benefit of hindsight,
did they penalize you? Did they penalize you when you do that on a tracker? So if you decide to pay in?
No, because most mortgages have a 10% overpayment option.
They
so
do.
I was still within the 10% buffer, so it didn't sort of affect me that much. But the thing was that, with the benefit of hindsight, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I'd kept the money and bought more. But like I said to you, because the thing is, one thing I missed out on is that I also, in 2004, my dad saw a warehouse for sale, and it was for sale subject to planning at 450. And my dad said, actually, we'll get planning here. This is predominantly residential. So again, what you shouldn't do. We did again something the opposite. So
what did you do? You said
we
you
went
to get planning yourself.
So yeah, that with subject to planning, you buy a 450. So we went up to the vendor, said, we'll pay you 350 now without planning. He said, okay, fine, I'll take it. Okay. But we thought, you know, this is a predominantly residential area. We'll get planning, no problem. And at that time, the council had a policy called scattered employment site. And that particular site was earmarked for scattered employment. So when we put planning in,
what does
I said, sorry.
Mean? What is scattered?
Well, basically, there are certain, for this particular authority, there are certain areas, even in purely residential areas, they wanted to maintain an employment area, employment generating site, which was commercial. So we had put planning in to build 15 apartments. So they rejected. So for 3 years, we were fighting the local authority. It cost me nearly 100 grand, but we finally won.
Okay.
So again, something in today's term you should never do, which is go in, buy a property thinking, oh, I'll get planning. You know, you should always have some idea about. We didn't do any research, anything. We just thought, it's a predominantly residential area, we'll get planning.
Yeah,
right?
It's usually
for 3 years.
Yeah, at least planning consultant on the phone, have a chat with their business.
Exactly.
Just see what they say.
Any of that. Did absolutely, totally the wrong way that we should do it. So I never advise anyone to do that. Yeah. But it taught me some important lessons. So, you know, 3 years. I mean, one of the things I remember, I think that's the other thing I think people should also learn when they're getting to borrowing money on mortgages or whatever, they should always leverage to the extent where if, for the, one of the better words, shit hits the fan, can you still fund your mortgage, right? And I was looking at another project and my bank manager was saying to me, because those days the banks used to throw money at you. They used to say, he was encouraging me to get into another project. And I said, look, I don't really want to get into another project. If the shit hits the fan with this particular project, how am I going to fund the mortgage? And my mortgage was something like £2,900 a month. But the property was an old warehouse single cavity wall. So I couldn't really rent it.
Yeah.
So so 3 years, I was paying £2,900 a month, funding it out of my own pocket. So had I gone for the other project, I could have ended up losing both of them.
Yeah.
So that's where, that's where my financial sort of knowledge came in as well, thinking you don't want to leverage too much. You want to be always evaluate, if the shit hits the fan, literally, can you still pay your mortgages?
I think sorry to interrupt you. There's a lot of people who want to get started in property, who are already in property, and they kind of over leverage in terms of they have a lot of expenses. Their properties have a lot of expenses, but they haven't ensured that if something does go wrong, they can fund it themselves. So it's ensuring that.
Yeah, what's the plan B? And so I always had my calculation that I could, and then finally after 3 years we got planning, and we made actually over £200,000 on it. In the end, we sold it to a developer. But benefit of hindsight, again, we shouldn't have sold it. We should have developed it ourselves. But, again, because we had the land.
Is that something you advise? Is that something you advise with your experience as well? That generally, if you're going to get planning, would you then build it out yourself or sell it on?
It depends, I suppose, on your fine. I mean, for us, I was just exhausted. Yeah. Having paid, maybe £36,000 a year for the mortgage, and there were, there's so many different surveys that had to get done. There was a soil. We actually had a contaminated soil, so we had to get that treated. That cost us £30,000. So there were so many things that had gone wrong in there. I mean, luckily for us, in that time, the property prices kept going up and up. So we eventually sold in 2007, just before the credit crunch, so to a developer, and he did an even better job than us, because obviously he was a professional, I wasn't, and he then took our plans, went to a specialist, and he actually got 19 units out of it. That's how he added value himself. So he made money, which is great. We made money on it eventually. So again, that was a very, very important lesson. But I think the reason, I suppose, I didn't have the sort of knowledge that people have today is because people have so much access to social media, so many different forums where you can learn these things, where you don't make these mistakes. So that was my other, and that sort of experience did sort of dampen my enthusiasm a little bit for property. I was still acting as a broker, still doing mortgages, but I sort of, for 4 or 5 years, I sort of held back, which was, one thing I've learned is that, at the moment you got a bull market, the property is going crazy, whether it's Wales, whether it's north of England, whether it's the south, property prices are skyrocketing. Absolutely. But there's still deals to be had. I always say, don't wait to buy a property, buy a property and wait. Yeah. Always, because once you buy a property, even if you lose value, you only make a loss when you dispose it. If you keep it, you haven't made a loss yet. You might be sitting on negative equity, but if you're renting it out, bringing in his rental to you, then what is the issue? So, and I think one thing I believe in property is that it's the only asset class which allows you to invest only 20 or 25% of your cash. Yeah. The rest of it is bank's money. Any other business you go to, stocks and shares, 100% of your money, 100% of it at risk.
Yes.
Cryptocurrency, fantastic growth, but it's collapsed from 44,000 to, what is it, 30 or 36,000 today. So, and if you'd put 10 grand in there, you'd be losing fair bit of it. So with property, you still have the building there. Yeah. It might be a loss on paper, but if it's a buy to let property, let's just say, and it's bringing you rental, it doesn't matter what the value is. It only matters when you look at to refinance and raise money on it, that so yeah. So I mean, that's my sort of starting with, and then I think about 5 years ago, I started becoming active again in trying to buy. So then I've been mostly looking to buy from auctions. In fact, so far, I haven't actually bought a property through a estate agent. It's been all auctions, and I've been lucky enough that I've had all the properties that I bought. They've all been below market purchases, and I think to every single one of them, I've been able to refinance, then pulling out all of my cash. So it gives me the opportunity then to recycle that cash, buy the next one.
Yeah.
So, and now I'm with the HMO that I owned, having run it for 20 years, paid off the mortgage. We then got planning to build 10 apartments in there, 7 in the old building, 3 in the new one, because I'm fed up with running such a large, because I have a day job.
How did you manage, you know, having the HMOs and still working at the same time? I mean, HMOs is a full-time job just for 2.
Yeah.
So imagine.
But I mean, like I said to you, because I went to the uni and they had this head tenancy scheme, which I knew nothing about. It's just the fact that I turned up and I actually signed up with them. And because we had done the building according to their specification, they always gave me a contract every year, rolling contract, irrespective whether the building was filled or not. That was their responsibility. So for 15 years, that worked perfectly for me. And even it got to a stage where if they had any breakdowns, my handy guy, John Herman, God bless his soul, he's passed away now. John, I gave the uni his direct number. I said, look, any issues you have, maintenance, but just give John a call. So they never used to bother me. So it was fantastic. So up to about 2015.
That was 2015. And you know, that's the beautiful thing is that when you're building your portfolio, I tell people, don't really think about you having to work in the business yourself if you don't want to. You can just outsource it, and it allows you just to grow quicker as well. It allows you to focus on growth rather than maintenance and management.
Yeah.
And that's
I think it's having what everybody calls power team, and I think it is a very, very important thing to have. You know, if you've got to have a good broker, have a good accountant, have a very good handyman. All these people, they're specialists in their own sort of fields. I mean, I remember when I was training up for my financial services exam, and one of the guys who was they used to call them RTOs, regional training officers, Peter Clark, his name was, and he said something I did remember to this day. And he said, I don't get those people. He goes, I can't stand those people who say, oh, I can do the handiwork at home, I can do this. He goes, look, my speciality is a financial advisor. I much rather sell 10 policies and then get a professional to do the job if I need doing something at home, rather than attempting to do something that I'm not specialist at. And I think that's very, very important.
Very important. It's a mindset shift, isn't it? From you doing the work yourself. And I think that's the difference between somewhat, I wouldn't say a business owner and entrepreneur, but there's a difference there when there's someone who's working for their work and there's someone who's outsourcing for their work and not having to work in it. Yeah, working, on the business, not in it. Like you said,
I think it's all about having, delegate your work, having a team around you, because that time that you save, you can then devote that time to sort of looking at next project. Whereas, I mean, I can barely change a bulb, if I'm honest with you. I'm the worst person to do the handy stuff. My wife just, now she has the phone numbers of all the handy guys that I deal with, so she just rings them. So, so again, just stick to what you're good at and get people around you in their own specialist fields.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I'm guilty of that myself sometimes. I'm actually quite good with handiwork. I'm fantastic at painting. I can do plastering. I can do quite a lot of different things. And I have to tear myself away from doing it because I actually enjoy doing it as well. And happy to get someone else in and let them do it. And same like the source of property.
Last time I did some painting, ended up more on me than the wall itself. So I think that was about 50 years ago.
Yeah. But the mindset of not having to do the work is definitely a shift that requires a lot of effort and reminding yourself. But yeah, definitely worthwhile. Wow.
Yeah.
So you're obviously a financial broker or financial consultant, and money is usually the biggest obstacle for so much people getting started in property. Some people have 20, they have 30, some people don't have anything, but they know they want to be a developer and develop property. How can they go about doing this? What kind of products do they that are out there that they can use?
I think if we look at someone getting into property for the first time, I always advise that first of all, buy the property for yourself to live in. So stop paying someone else's mortgage, right? Yeah. Biggest plus point of having a property in your own name is that then all mortgage lenders then allow you to borrow money for a buy-to-let property. I mean, you could, if you had a property, say where you are in Neath, and you were owner occupier, you can, if you had the deposit, you can then buy a property for 400,000 with a 25% deposit in the south, even if your income was £10,000 a year, because all they're looking at is that you're a homeowner, you experience owning a property. Then it just opens up so many doors for you. And now the biggest advantage people have today is that the advent of the 5% mortgage that's been in the news in the past couple of weeks. So again, that's a fantastic opportunity.
Before you go on to that, the thing with owning your own house, once that money has been spent on a deposit, so say someone has a £20,000 deposit, they want to know, do I purchase first or do I rent first? So sorry, do I purchase first my own home, or do I buy a buy-to-let first with that one pot of money? What should they do, and how should they approach that?
Yes, a very good question. And the issue with this is that when you're a first-time buyer, first-time landlord, you're very, very limited in terms of your ability to borrow for a buy-to-let property. There's only about 3 or 4 lenders that I can think of, NatWest being one of them, but they don't do limited company products. So they will allow you to borrow for letting purposes, but they will assess it as if it was a residential application.
Okay.
So they will, if the assessment is exactly the same, so they'll assess it on that, and they'll also assess whether the rental stacks up as well.
Yeah.
So you've got to jump through hoops in that. So that you can do it that way. Then there's another lender who can lend you first-time buyer, first-time landlord, but the minimum income requirement is £40,000.
40. Wow.
40,000. So, I mean, if you're a first-time buyer, first-time landlord, it is really, really tough.
Is that
I've
easy
actually,
to do it through a company?
even if you do as a company,
even if you do it as a company, they still look at the director themselves because the company is newly
yeah,
established.
I mean, on buy-to-let, that's the, if you had any other business, you're a limited company, you went to borrow against that company, the bank wants to see 3-year trading history and all that. There's nothing like that on buy-to-let, because they assess you as the individual. So you can set up a company tonight, and tomorrow you can go and buy a buy-to-let property in it, because they're not going to assess the company, they will assess you. All they will look at is, are you a homeowner? Yes, you are. That's it, you qualify. Do you have the 25% deposit? Or where you are, you can even get away with 20% because the yields are that much higher.
Yeah.
But where we are barely stacking up with 25%, believe it or not, because prices haven't, the rents haven't quite followed the high prices.
Yeah.
So, that's a major problem for us at the moment. So yeah, it's a really tough one. Somebody who's got limited cash thinking, I want to get into property investment, but if I buy, my cash gets tidied up there, then perhaps what they need to look at is doing a JV with somebody. So you put together and finding someone who already has a fund. But the other thing is, one thing they still need to understand is with 5% mortgages, now if the income stacks up, it's still worth going for that house, because if you're buying a property for 50 grand, for example, that's probably very low, whatever it is, but even 100, you only need £5,000.
Yeah.
And it's 5,000 is not a lot of money.
It's not.
And the other way they could, and I think the other way people can add value these days, I mean, it's an area that I'm not familiar with at all, but I've been listening to a lot of people talking about it, and I've got an idea. Rent to rent is a fantastic way of generating income over and above your normal salary.
Yeah.
So much so that you can, I mean, my son met one of our clients on the train, and he said, oh, I'm getting into rent. This is about 2 years ago. So fast forward today, he's earning £17,000 a month from rent to rent.
And he's growing the business.
And he's given up his job, and he now also owns 3 buy-to-lets. And when he spoke to him, he wouldn't even have a dream of owning a buy-to-let property, one property because he lives near Islington in London. Their 2-bedroom flat is about 400,000-500,000, well, 700,000. So that's the sort of thing that they could look at. I think rather than looking at, several strategies, because you can sometimes get too much information, focus on one area. So if you want to be doing rent to rent, because there is so many, because I deal with landlords. My company does nearly 50 million in buy-to-lets alone. So we have so many landlords as clients. And we sort of, so many of them are basically tired, or they have a 9-to-5 job. So majority of the landlords they have a 9-to-5 job. They probably get 2 properties or 1 property, 3 or 4 properties. They don't want the headache of dealing with, tenants. They're at work and tenants phone them up. Oh my, there's a leak. How do I deal with it? So there is an opportunity for rent. There's definitely a market there. So if you can sort of, if you're want to get into property. And the thing is, one thing that rent to rent teaches you is how to manage. You learn what the pros and the cons are, what's involved in managing a property, what are the everyday breakdowns, so you learn all that. So when you then buy a property for yourself, you got all that knowledge with you, so you don't make the mistakes what I did or what somebody else has done who'd never dealt with tenants before.
That's how I got started, believe it or not, is in rent. I started off with lease options and didn't get anywhere, but rent.
Well, I don't need to tell you how it works. You're the expert.
I still got rent to rent to this very day, and they generate a fantastic income, and it works quite well. It's a very good strategy, I agree. But in terms of, so the person who has that 20,000, so there's a few things that they can do, but you advise that they would go and get their own home first. Once you're a homeowner, then you're open to many other products.
Yeah, but it depends where they are.
Just joint venture with someone and get a buy to let that way.
I mean, it depends where they are, because obviously if they're in an area where the house price average is 80 grand, 100 grand, 70, personally, I would buy a property to live first, because you only need 5% deposit. So if your income stacks up and you got 5%, you got it.
Is that on the new
and
build?
then,
is that new builds only?
No.
Oh,
that was the previous scheme. The new scheme is
anyone.
You can anybody could buy it, even a home mover could buy it. So up to £600,000 value. So, it's a fantastic opportunity for people today. I mean, I think in Neath, what's an average house price there?
125. Which,
so 125.
125 to 169.
So even let's say one you go on the lower end, let's say 120. So that's £6,000 deposit you need.
Yeah.
Or if it's 150, 10% is 15, 5% is 7.5 grand. It's not a lot. Obviously, income is the barrier. Does your income stack up? So typically, if I say, somebody buying a property for 150, they put down 5%, so they need £142,000 mortgage. Now they need about 32 grand, 31.5 to 32,000 pound a year income.
Yeah, which
so,
is very doable here, actually.
The other way you could do it is if you got to say there's 2 siblings, because I had a chap come in and he said, I'm on 18 grand a year and I'm looking to buy the price that it was in the north, but his income wasn't enough. I said, what about your brother or sister? Oh yeah, my brothers. I said, well, just do a joint, use your incomes. But he said, but he wants to buy his own. He doesn't want to lose his first time buyer. There's a product called sole proprietor joint borrower, where one person owns the property, both of them own the mortgage. So that way the other person is no longer still a first time buyer. So when one of them, his income improves in the next 2 to 3 years, they can refinance, remove the other one. He can then go on and buy, but at least he's used his brother or sister's income to get onto the property ladder. So there is just so many ways that you can use to start off. But the reason I always say people should buy for themselves first is because that you only need 5%, whereas in investment, you're going to need minimum 15%. I mean, there are 1 or 2 lenders who are lending at 15%, but they will only lend to people who've got at least 1 or 2 properties already, the experienced landlord. So starting off, you're going to need minimum 20 to 25% deposit. I mean, one of the ways we have done it here, I have is through bridging, so bridge to let. Now, bridging is what I call Rolls Royce of finance. So like the name, it comes at a cost, but it gives you a lot of flexibility. So I'll give you an example. I had a chap who was working at Sainsbury's here in Wickham on 17 grand a year. The property he wanted to buy was 350,000. Now on his salary, he couldn't even get 125 grand mortgage.
Yeah.
So, but he didn't want to live. He wanted to buy to that. What happened? He inherited about 130,000 pounds. So what I did, I got him a bridge to let more, because the bridge to let lender doesn't care because they roll up the payment for full 12 months.
Yeah.
So you got to have 25% and enough cash to pay the 12 months payments up front. And what happens is that buy to let lenders, if you own a property for 6 months, they then consider you as an experienced landlord, like Mortgage Works, Birmingham, and so on. So what we did, after 7th month, we applied for a remortgage with the Mortgage Works. And they gave him the mortgage for up to 75%, paid off the bridge after 7 months. So he saved 5 months interest because the first time bridge to let lenders always want 12 months term. But with bridging, if you can pay off after 3 months, there's no penalties on it. But generally we waited 6 months because then that opens up all of the buy-to-let market. So he wanted to go with a vanilla buy-to-let lender, a high street lender, and I think the property was valued at 325. He was getting £1,300 a month rent. So TMW gave him a mortgage of 244,000 on an income of 17.
And an income of 17. So is that a route someone can take if they maybe never had the 130,000, but they have 20 or 30,000?
It's all relative, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, where you are, with the property say 150, as long as they've got 37,500 deposit, which is the 25%, and then they've got enough money for the roll-up payments. I mean, you're going to need about 50K, I think, on a 150 grand property. So you still need a fair bit of cash. Okay. But this is where, again, for example, say 2 people who've got £25,000 each, they could end up buying together on a bridge. 6 months later, they can refinance it as a normal buy-to-let. And hey, presto, they now got themselves, a property. Now, the problem is that money is then tied up into that property. So how do they then go on to other properties? Getting together £50,000 is not easy. So this is where, if you are genuinely looking into property investing, then perhaps just a property with 25% deposit is not the way forward. What you need to look at is, I think, rent to rent. So you're adding value, you're bringing in more money into your pocket. And when you're dealing with rent, you will know that yourself. You then deal with landlords who've got tired properties, or your landlord who wants to sell quickly. So you buy below market. And that's where you add value. Because they always say when you do property investment, the value is at the beginning, not the end, most of the times. So if you buy below market, then what happens is that even if you buy under a bridge finance, let's say you buy below market for 120,000, the property value is normally 150, and it needs a bit of TLC. You buy it, you spend about 5-6 grand. Now the end value is 180. You can then refinance it at 75%, get about £135,000 mortgage. So now you only go about 20-30 grand into the deal rather than the full 25%. That just leaves you a bit more cash to go on to the next one. So, or the other way of looking at it is if you're buying a property where it's got potential to add value by turning it to an HMO or converting it to, say, 1 or 2 flats. And nowadays, bridging has become very, very innovative. So there are bridge lenders there's a product called, there's a refurbishment bridge. So with that product, the bridge lender will give you the money to buy the property. And then as long as the value, because if you say to the bridge lender, I am buying this property.
They give you the full amount
Sorry?
of money. Is it the full amount?
Sorry?
Is it the full amount that they give you? If the property is 100,000, they give you the full amount?
If it's a below market purchase, they will give you 90% of the purchase price or 75% of the open market value, whichever is lower.
Yeah.
So technically you could get 90 grand on a 100 grand mortgage. If you say to them, this property's open market value is 150, I picked it up for 100, they will value at 150.
Okay.
And then if you sort of say to them, I'm going to convert this into 2 flats. So if the surveyor says, yep, in my opinion, these will be converted to flats, the end value, or sorry, 3 flats, say, for example, the end value will be 225,000. They will then give you the money based on the GDV to do the works as well at 65% GDV. Wow. So again, there's a lot of innovation, but with these things, the most important thing is that the numbers need to stack up. Yeah. So what they shouldn't be doing is what I did when I bought my first HMO.
Yeah.
Just jump in, Because especially if you do bridging, because bridging is very expensive, but it serves a very, very important purpose. So I always say the way bridging is like crossing a deep river on a boat, having to swim back. And if you can't swim, well, you know the result.
Yeah.
So, and whenever people bring me projects and they're looking at bridging finance, I always first look at exit. So I look at the project and I think, you know, they're going to do all this. At the end, does the end value justify the bridging they're going to do? Because what you don't want to do is get someone to bridge, which they can't get out of. That's when you lose money, potentially all of it. So bridging is fantastic product, but it's very, very expensive, or can be very, very expensive if you don't, you know, look at the numbers.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I actually also do, is partly when people come to me, a lot of my regular clients, I evaluate projects for them. So if they say, you know, I'm buying this house for £400,000, it's got potential to turn it into 3 apartments. I will then go back to the bridge lender, say, this is the area. Can you just tell me whether their numbers stack up? Similarly, if you have a, you know, I also do development funding. So when developers come to me with, you know, land with planning for 4 houses or 5 or whatever, I always go back to the lenders and say to the lender, you know, these are the numbers they're looking at. And
yeah. So
I'm sure you will
doing the due diligence. The lender would do desktop due diligence, I could imagine. So the person who's going for this deal, they've got to make sure that their numbers stack, like you said. Are they happy to do thorough due diligence, I can imagine? So doing your desktop due diligence, going out there, speaking with agents, getting on the phone calls, and making sure that they really can.
There's no,
value.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. There's no substitute for due diligence. They have, and you can't expect anyone in the food chain to do that for you. You have to do that yourself. Talk to the agent, letting agent, obviously sales agent. So find out, you know, what the rental market is like. Find out what, you know, the end value, what the properties are selling at, what the demand is like. You must be armed with that information before you go and see your broker or whoever. First, you must have that information. Broker can't really do that for you. Solicitor can't do it for you. You have to do that for yourself.
And so, same with the renovation cost as well, with the refurb. When you're going to a bridging finance, I guess they want to look at what the cost of the development is. What kind of information do they want? That concrete information they want, so you know you've got
again,
cost accurate.
So for that, there's even more due diligence you require, because if it's a conversion, you know, you want to see that there is no sort of surprises in there for you. So I'll give you an example for myself. The building I'm sitting in, so we bought this from Barclays back in 1993, and we put in planning to convert it into 7 apartments and build a purpose-built office for me. Spend £30,000 getting through that stage. And then we said, oh yeah, now we need a structural survey to see if the, you know, building is man enough to take the weight of additional flats. And it failed a structural survey. So because one of the walls was single cavity, so we have to do underpinning of that, and that's going to cost us 150,000. So now we shelved that plan. We decided to demolish the whole building. We're now going for 14 apartments in here. So our plans have changed.
So
but again,
it's more cheaper to demolish a building than underpin the building.
Well, for us, it's not cheaper, it's more expensive, but we get more units.
You get what you
So instead of 7, so we are going for 14 instead of 7.
So you're doubling.
So that's the,
whereas
yeah,
underpinned, I guess they still would have had a limit on how much you.
We still would have had the limitation, and you got. So these are the things that you see. Even if you're an experienced investor, you're still learning. You're still, you know. I've got a guy who's a full-time property developer. He is fantastic what he does, and all he does basically buys land with no planning, turns it into land with planning, and that's his job. That's what he does day in, day out, and he knows the system inside out. And yet he's doing a development in Berkshire, and they've discovered that there is now, when they did the digging, there's some cables there which they didn't pick up. Now it's going to cost him £25,000 extra to remove those, and you know, so that's something he hadn't put into his estimation. So you know, that's an extra. So you know, that's what I'm saying. When you are doing these, there's so many things that you need to take into account. So if you're doing a, see, the thing is, if you're just buying a house which could be converted, that's not that sort of critical.
Yeah.
It's an existing building, and it's not that. So for me, for example, when we did the pubs into 7 apartments and 3 apartments, especially the old building, it's gone above, I think it's gone about £50,000 above the budget. But then for some reason we had a contingency for it anyway, because we knew that potentially that was going to, because obviously it's a 120-year-old building. It's very difficult to know the full inside out structure of it. So you're always going to get things that you don't expect. One of the things, we didn't expect the some amount of rubbish that would come out. We had budgeted 20 skips and ended up 35 skips. So that's the sort of thing, so if you're just buying a house and you want to convert that, you still need to do diligence, whether the local authority allows you to do it. But I think one of the nuggets people can take away is when you're buying 2-bedroom houses, for example, always look at the floor plan. See if you can add a 3rd bedroom. That's the cheapest way to add value, because all you need is stud walls, and you just added, nearly, if you're around here, if you buy a 2-bedroom house, it's about 280, 270. If you had a 3rd bedroom, it goes up to 330 to 350.
Yeah.
But converting it to a 3rd bedroom is less than 10 grand.
Absolutely.
So,
and that's one of the things I did in London as well before I moved here. It's finding one bedrooms, huge 1-bedrooms or huge studios, and then adding in a stud wall and turning it into 2, and that way you've got your value added. And like I said, it's a considerable amount. But I think with the due diligence and the lender, the bridging lenders, do they look for a solid builder's quotation on paper that's kind of like a fixed quote, or how rigid is this due diligence for the builders?
Yeah, they want to see. Some ask for 3 quotes, but most of them want to see a fully detailed breakdown of costs in terms of, for example, if you are buying a property where you're thinking of convert it to 3 apartments, they want to see the full breakdown of costs. Even going down as up to the carpet, whether you're going to do a carpet, whether you're going to put central heating in there and gas central heating and electrics, or is it going to be, you have to break it down to everything. So because from bridge lender, at the end of the day, they're only lending you for short term. So they want you to get in there, do the work, get out, give them the money back, so they'll go on to the next person. So they don't want their money stuck in there, and they don't want the loan to go bad, because their money gets held up, and it's more work for them. So everybody in the food chain suffers. So that's why they are very, very thorough in their checks in terms of whether the numbers stack up or not. But ultimately, it is up to the investor to sort of make sure that the job runs. Giving you my own example, our project is 6 months behind. Obviously, we've had this COVID issues, but the other issues has been that it's, we didn't really anticipate, but finding at the moment, we got a kitchen guy. He's just, it took us 2 months before he could start our job. So, but we wanted him to work on it, because I know he's very, very good at what he does, but he just couldn't come off that site. So, there's so many things that you need to be aware of that need to run on time.
Yeah. And in that circumstance, I guess any lending that you have, you want to over forecast the time that you need it for, so you can take into consideration these.
Right. It's a very good point. So with bridging, if somebody says to me that they're going to take 12 months to do a project, I always put 18 months.
Yeah.
So, because the thing is, if you finish early, there's no cost to you. I mean, they will mean that they will keep more money up front from you. There's no doubt about that. But if you finish in 12 months, they'll refund the 6 months back to you. But if you went for 12 months and the bridge has to be extended, that's when it becomes expensive, because the lender will charge arrangement fee again. They might put you on a default rate, which is probably another 0.5% higher. So, always. So I never, ever go with, if somebody says to me, I'm going to finish this 6 months, I still say to them, I'm going to do it over 12 months, whether you like it or not, because it doesn't cost you anything if you don't use it. But if you end up using it, at least it doesn't cost you extra.
Yeah.
So that's why, you'd really be, bridging, like I said, is a fantastic way of, adding value and, raising the finance than to come out of the bridge and then recycling it. But numbers need to stack up. But that's one way of funding. The other way of doing it is do JVs. So, 3 people are getting together. With JV, the risk is much, much smaller. So, because it's your money. I mean, one of the things with my project is that it's been, I've funded it myself, and through my buy-to-let portfolio, I refinanced it. So I've not had bridging on it, or development finance on it rather. So if I had development finance on it, I am now 6 months over. So I would have had to renegotiate. So again, but these are and I do this day in, day out, but even people who are familiar with the system, in conversions, there are so many things that could go wrong. So you need to have a contingency in place.
Yeah.
But like I said, you can have so many different ways of getting onto a property ladder. And JV is one of the easiest ways of getting onto property, because one person working on their own with 25k is that much hard. But if you can find another 3 with 25, that's 100 grand. So you could just buy a property for, let's say worth 80 grand. You got 20 grand to add value to it, and then you can either flip it, make the profit, or refinance it, pull your money out, go on to the next one.
Yeah.
As a JV. So, and the thing is, when you, sorry.
No, I was going to say, in that scenario, when you're doing that, I guess people would set up a company and they would all trade through a company to do that, to make sure that there's, an equal shareholding, and everyone, you use solicitors' contracts, do your agreements and so forth like that.
Yeah, it's a very important question, because you need to decide. If you're doing JVs, for flips, it's fairly easy, because you do the work, you sell it, you all make your, equal amount of profit, or based on your unequal, if one person has higher, skin in the deal. Yeah. But if you want to keep it, then you need to make sure who you're getting in bed with, because you're going to share your financial credential with them. So there will be an association.
Yeah.
So you don't want to get into bed with somebody who doesn't pay their credit cards on time, doesn't pay their phone bill on time, because that will impact you as well.
That's it.
So
it shows up on your credit report, these things, doesn't it?
Exactly. So for that reason, you need to decide if you want to go with somebody to hold, then you need to be on a level with them. Make sure, it's 6 or 9 months or a year down the line, you're going to fall out, and you got a house that you own together, you can't get out of, and this. So that's where you really need to make sure who you're going to work with.
Yeah.
So, but if it flips, do them up, sell them, then it's not a big issue, because
Well, how does it look from a lender's perspective? If someone's joint venturing together, but they still may need some additional lending, maybe development finance, do they have to take the legal route of, company lets as well, or is it better that they just stay as individuals and then apply together as individuals? How does that look best on paper, or get the best rates?
So are we talking about buy to let now?
No, we're talking about doing a flip, but joint venturing together, and they may still need access to finance.
So with flips, you can't get because a bridge is the only way, of short-term finance. Because basically we also call mortgages term loans. So what we mean by term loans, or lenders call term loans, is 2, 3, 4, 5 year fixed products, or 2, 3 year terms, because with those things, lenders know that you're getting that finance to hold. So you're going to rent a property out and so on. But if your plan is to buy a property, do it up, and 2, 3, or 4, 5 months later, sell it, then term loans aren't appropriate for it. And there are lenders who have got buy-to-let products with no early repayment charges. So you could use that mortgage, but if you do it once and the lender finds out, they will put you in a blacklist. You won't get a mortgage again with them. So because the product they sell, the term loan, is purely for buying and holding, for letting. The development or the flipping is where the bridging comes into or development finance. They're short-term finance, 3, 9, 6, 12, 18 months. The idea with those is that you buy the property, you do it up, and you sell it, and then you walk away. So for flipping, you always use bridging or bridging and combination of development finance if there's development involved, or specialist bridges.
And people who are bridges, they don't mind people joint venturing together in a new company, or do they do it as individuals? Does it matter?
No, it'll have to be, obviously, if there's 4 people involved, it'll either be a joint application in individual names, or it'll be a company setup. So that would be up to the individuals. Now, the other thing is, in this particular scenario, the important factor everybody needs to remember, that when you buy a property, there's 2 types of contracts. There's a joint tenancy, which is between a husband and a wife. So both partners have an equal share. So if one dies, the surviving partner gets the benefit of the rest of the share. But there's a second one, which is called tenancy in common. So that's where, so if me and you were investing together, just as business partners, appropriate contract for us is tenancy in common, because tenancy in common can be unequal share as well. So if you had more money in the skin, naturally you should have a higher percentage of the share. So it could be 70-30, 60-40, or even 50-50 if there's a 50-50. But there's 4 people involved, and again, 25 each, yes, but it could be one person putting 35% down, and then the others, you just reduce it appropriately. So again, you need to make sure that when you are buying under that contract, you always buy under tenancy in common. So there is no dispute later on. When you come standing at one person saying, oh, well, I'll put more money in, you have that contract written from the outset.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think that's really important and useful to know. Thank you, definitely. So I mean, it's been really good talking about finances, and I know that's the hugest hurdle, and I know I'm just hoping this has helped so much people, help clarify a lot of different uncertainties that they may have had.
Delighted to be in help.
Yeah, and people, especially who are new, I always tell them, speak to a financial broker, speak to them, because they have it in their head, they have no access to finance, they don't have enough money, and then they stop before they've even tried. So it's definitely useful to have these kind of conversations with you, and thank you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think what people need to do is, I'm a great believer in people working together. I remember I was doing in Hammersmith, a lady's mortgage. She was a nurse, and she said to me, oh, one of my friends is looking for a mortgage. And so while I was there, she called her. So I found out her income just wasn't stacking up. And I said to her, where do you live? She said, oh, I house share with 2 other nurses. I said, okay. So I said, what are their salaries? I don't know. I said, find out. She said, what can I ask them? I said, no, I've got an idea for you. You like it? She said, okay. So now one of them was working, but she texted her, so she replied back. The other one was off. So we found out they had a combined income of £70,000. So I said, look, why don't you buy together? You're paying rent together, house sharing together, buy a house together. And they ended up buying a house together. And the rent was combined. I think they're paying about £1,400 a month rent. The mortgage was £900. So they saved £500 a month. And then I think 3 years later, they sold the property and they made £100,000 profit. So 30 odd grand between them. So it's just, it helps to work together sometimes. So just don't just think I can do this on my own. Sometimes you can't. So, there's 4 friends sharing a flat or a house, and if they've got 4 incomes, but they haven't got enough deposit on their own, well, buy it together. Because then it's your property. As you're paying the mortgage, you're adding equity to it. And if the value goes up again, you're adding more equity to it. And tomorrow when you have, you can marry, you have partners, your circumstances hopefully improve, you can then buy the others out or whatever. So, obviously make sure you don't fall out because you have a mortgage together. So it's a bit of a tricky situation. But, I would say that, working together, it does definitely makes job that much easier.
Yeah. I think property is a bit like a puzzle, isn't it? You just got to learn how to put the jigsaw pieces together and then ultimately together, which is why speaking with someone like you is quite good, because not only do you have the financial element, but your experience allows us to tap into how the best way to.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I always say I'm not a transactional broker. I'm a broker who's an investor. So whenever somebody comes to me with a mortgage application, I always look at it how I would do it for myself. So, I had a chap come in last week. He was looking at the 5% product, and I talked him out of it. And I said, look, go for the 10%, just beg and borrow from mom and dad, and just add another 5%. Because what happened was the property he was buying, the 5% product had to lock in for 5 years. And over 5 years, he was going to pay whatever he saves in 5% today in interest, which he loses forever. So I said, look, go and beg and borrow as much as you can, see if you can get to 10%. And he managed to get to, so he got a cheaper rate. We got him a 2-year deal. So what happens after 2 years is he's been paying mortgage back. So he's added more equity to the property. He then, after 2 years, he might be able to get into 85% loan to value product. So again, gain a cheaper deal even more. So again, that's where, so I never just, what you would say, I never just take order to do a mortgage. I always look at how, best you can sort of help somebody not only get onto the property ladder, but in the most cost-effective way as well. Because the other thing from my point of view is if they can see the owner help them, they will always be referring me other clients. Because my business, I only started recently going on Clubhouse. Facebook is the only thing I go to that's the only social media I go to. I don't advertise anywhere. All of my business comes from referrals, all of it. And it's just purely because, I help as many people as I possibly can. You can make honest mistakes, but, honest mistakes, we are human, we can all make them. But generally, I have, and I think one of the things I'll be lucky with is so many people who are, when they were looking to sell their houses in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, that sort of time, if they had equity in them, I talked them out of selling their house. I said, look, I'll get you funding to buy the next property, but keep this. And they're all now sitting on average, £100,000 extra equity. Now they think I'm a genius. I'm not. I'm just. It's just
so funny you should say that. I have a friend like that now. She's got a house in Margate. I think it's in Margate, and in London. Very expensive, and she's thinking about selling it so she can move and develop in Croydon, funnily. And I'm really telling her, don't sell it, but she's a much more mature lady, and I think the access to finance has been a bit of a stumbling block. But I think I'm going to recommend her to chat with you because she really is going to sell this house, and I just don't think she should. I just don't think she should.
I think thing is, there are now lenders who can go beyond 75 years of age. If you are working in a job that's not physically strenuous, that you can work in your 70s. And so lenders are now, even high street lenders, Santander, they go up to age, most lenders go up to age 70. Santander go up to age 75. And there is now a lender called Family Building Society. They can actually go beyond 75 years, as long as your job is not, so, if you say I'm a bricklayer, obviously you can't work when you're 75 or 80. But if you are doing an administration job in an office, you can comfortably work when you're 70 or whatever. So as long as if she's in a profession which is, like an admin work or office work, then she can go beyond her retirement age if that's what's stopping her borrowing the amount that she needs to borrow. Because I always say that if you've got equity in your property and you got sufficient income to refinance and buy the next property, keep this one. I always say keep it, because
what if they don't?
Sorry,
what if they don't have the income? Does that change things?
Yes, it does, because obviously because effectively what you're doing is when you refinance your current property to buy the next property, it's called let to buy. So you are saying to the lender, I want to raise finance here as a buy to let. So they can lend you up to 75% of the value, but they also want you simultaneously buy the next property as well. So they won't just let you borrow, because what they won't let you do is borrow up to 75% on your main residence, because if your income's not stacking up, they think it's a backdoor resi. So obviously it's called scheme manipulation. They won't allow you to do that. But if your income stacks up, you refinance your current property, pull out the cash, put it onto the next one as a deposit, and then use your income for the rest of it on the next property. And this one becomes your buy to let. But obviously your income needs to stack up. If it doesn't, then unfortunately, you might have no choice but to sell it.
Yeah. That might be the circumstance, Well, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
It's been so useful.
No, I've enjoyed our chat. I hope I didn't go on too much.
I've got so much nuggets.
No, I'm great. That's fantastic. I mean, anybody who needs to sort of, if they want to get in touch with me, just if they do, my website, www.abafinance.co.uk. There's my sister Uzma there. She's the principal advisor. She's basically the regulated broker for my firm. There's my son Hasnain. He's another regulated broker. I do all the special non-regulated stuff. So I don't advise for house when people. I used to be one, but I can't be asked doing my CPD every year. It's just too much headache.
Yeah.
So I work with developers on the special stuff. But Uzma, she's fantastic. She's been doing this job with me. She's a qualified solicitor, believe it or not. I talked her out of going to be a solicitor. So she's been, yeah, exactly. It's very much a small family business.
Yeah.
We got direct FCA license about 6 years ago. So we're direct FCA regulated, not part of a network. We're a whole of market. So, you know, so anybody has any questions, even if they just want some advice, happy to, you know, not just for a mortgage, you know, I'm not saying that they just contact me with mortgage only. If they want some ideas, if they have, you know, a project where they're looking at, happy to have a chat.
Fantastic. And that's www.abafinance.com.
.co.uk, sorry.
.co.uk.
Yeah, that's got all our contact. If they go into there, it's got all of our contact details there.
Fantastic.
My mobile, email address, everything. Okay.
Oh, good. Excellent. We'll do that. Thank you so much again, and you take care. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I've really enjoyed it. Hopefully, whatever I said made sense. So, yeah, look forward to it next time. Hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. You take care.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Sabrina. Thank you. Thanks very much. Take care. Have a nice weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.